Hey guys, so in Mark 4 yesterday, Jesus had given the parable of the sower and then had finished off by calming the winds and waves, calming the storm, and leaving his disciples filled with great fear as they said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Ultimately pointing to his divinity as Yahweh himself. And it begins in chapter 5 by saying they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And so this was not obviously a normal situation. This was serious demonic influence, serious demon possession. It was a very unnatural occurrence, like a work of Satan beyond what you would even read about in the Bible. Like, this is a very unique account. I mean, we talk about it a lot, obviously. I am Legion, like we are Legion. This is a very well-known passage. But you have to understand that within the context of the rest of the Bible, you don't ever really see something quite like this, where one man is so demonically influenced. The only sort of corollary we have is when Saul has a unclean spirit enter into him, and he starts throwing javelins at David. But other than that, there's nothing quite like this, where there's that much. And usually, in Jewish tradition, if you had more than one demon, from my understanding, there's this idea that there's nothing you can do about it. Like, you cannot, you pray to God and leave it to him, because no amount of Jewish exorcism can really get this done. Like, an unclean spirit that bad, there's nothing a person can do apart from the power of God. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." And let's note also, pigs were ceremonially unclean for the Jewish people. So already this was an area where pigs were already unclean. So sending an unclean spirit into it kind of makes sense within God's standard that he had set forth for the Jewish people. But he sends them out. They say, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission. Ultimately, we see Jesus caring for the man instead of all these pigs. Obvious, I shouldn't have to say this, but nowadays we have to say it. God cares a whole lot more about one human soul than he does about a bunch of pigs. Shouldn't be a problem, but unfortunately, some people need to hear that. So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country, and people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. They obviously had never seen him like this before. It was such a departure from being covered, indwelt by all of these unclean spirits, tons of demons, to suddenly he's just in his right mind, he's clothed, he's just acting like a normal human being. So they were afraid. They didn't know what to think of it. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus, "Stay with us. You did an incredible miracle. We want to praise you and honor you." That's not what it says. It says they begged Jesus to depart from their region. They saw the loss of livestock. They saw the loss of farm animals. They saw the loss of animal life. And they didn't look at the man who was healed. They didn't look at the man whose life was changed by God as he was redeemed from spiritual oppression that he had been going through, night and day, cutting himself, living in a tomb, having supernatural strength because of being demonically possessed. This man was not in the right place, And they don't acknowledge that this was the power of God in this man's life. They were afraid at a situation where it was like, ooh, that's a loss of money. That's a loss of these animals. Please leave. That is what happens when you look to materialism as opposed to the work of God. Like, what else is there to say about that? It's exactly like the Pharisees looking to accuse Jesus on the Sabbath instead of saying, wow, look at the miracle. Look at the miracle that he did. We should all be able to stand back in awe and say, wow, regardless of the cost, God did such an incredible work here. And so he did not permit him. It's so sad how often we deny the work of God in our lives, even when there are difficult situations, even when there are things that it doesn't seem like it worked out exactly the way we want. Maybe our job isn't going the way we thought it would. Maybe the relationship isn't going as well as we had hoped. And yet, a lot of times, these are things that we prayed about. These are blessings. And we just, in our sinful nature, take for granted the blessings that God has given us. And so we just need to really take this very seriously. But they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. And as he was getting in the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone marveled. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live. And he went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she had said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, we don't understand how, we just are given that information, she was healed. Perceiving in himself the power had gone out, immediately he turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? And his disciples said to him, you see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, who touched me? And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. She stepped out in faith to reach out to him, and also trusted him with the response. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house, that being Jairus, some who said, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, do not fear, only believe. And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him, because these were professional mourners. They were people who were paid to be there. So that's why they would laugh. But he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, Talitha cumi, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. Notice that it was through the suffering, through the longing, through the patience with that we then see the greater miracle performed by Jesus. Also note that Jesus didn't have to pray to God the way that Elijah or Elisha had to do. He just said, arise, because Jesus has the power, the authority to raise from the dead and to raise others from the dead.